We are back for Talkin Hoops, part 2 this season. Michael McCleary of the Argus Leader and Jason Andera of Midco Sports joining you from our homes instead of the studio, but hopefully you can make do. How are you doing, Michael? I know not feeling 100%, but good enough for Talkin Hoops, right?
Yeah, a little sore from yesterday's game. Very up and down emotions, but I'll get right back to it. I'm always game to talk hoops.
Let's do it. Let's start talking hoops. I wanted to start off by just looking at some of the top performers over the last week of play, and Spencer Barr, what he did on Tuesday night against Pierre. He threw up 51 points. It's the second time we've seen a 50-point scorer, Michael, in the last week. This guy for Aberdeen Central, he's led them to a couple of wins, which seemed unlikely just a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, and I think we might have seen three 50-point games in boys basketball this year. If we go back to Joe Saylor with White River and Brian LaRoche for Lower Brule. So yeah, we've had quite a few 50-point games throughout the year. So I guess it's starting to get a little bit old, but but no, I mean Aberdeen Central is they're obviously Brandon Valley's a really good team. Pierre's a really good team. These are all good teams that they're playing against, and they're a team that probably isn't getting the respect that they deserve, just given the individual performances and some of the wins that they've been able to get in the past couple weeks.
Yeah, that's been huge, and he exploded for 35 points and 51 points in his last two games. A couple other great performances to see on the list here. I had a chance to check out JT Rock last week, a 21-point game against O'Gorman, and then came back with 29 points against Mitchell. He was impressive. At the Hanson Classic, we saw Isaac Bruns go off for 30 points. We saw Joe Seiler in a loss go for 42. And we saw Malik Weaker have a big game with 29 points, 3 steals. And then Damon Wilkinson's just been on fire all season long in both the shooting and rebounding categories.
Yeah, we talked to Damon after that game that DeSmet played. Obviously, it was a win for them, but a couple games before they played Hamlin, and Hamlin was able to sneak out with a win with them. And a lot of the talk was about how Hamlin was able to deal with the size differential that Damon Wilkinson had with their forwards. I believe Hamlin doesn't have anybody over 6'5", and obviously Damon Wilkinson's 6'10". Hamlin wanted to make it clear they did not stop Damon Wilkinson. He still had 25 and 25. That was he's been dominant all year, and is obviously continuing it during the Hanson Classic this weekend.
Yeah, and speaking of that Hanson Classic, you and I were both there for the boys Hanson Classic, and let's just go through some impressions. First of all, you were there all day, but I started watching Winter at St. Thomas More, and that was one of the first big upsets of the day. Winter has only one loss this year, and that loss was to a AA peer team. Really did a good job of shutting down Caleb Hollenbeck.
Yeah, and we were able to talk to Winter after the game as well, and it seemed like they learned quite a bit from that pure loss. It was not a close game at all, Winter obviously they were talking about some of the football success and some of the early basketball success. This team kind of needed a game like that just to kind of show what their flaws were. But Aiden Barfus was amazing in that game. Obviously, Blake Vollmer did a great job against Caleb Hollenbeck. St. Thomas More is going to be right up there with some of the top teams in Class A. But I think after a game like that, we really have to give credit where credit is due and have Winter in that mix too, because that didn't seem like a fluke where Winter was just making shot after shot after shot. They defended really well, and they got a couple lucky ones to fall, a couple Aiden Barfus threes in the corner, but that's in the grand scheme of that game, it didn't really have as big of an impact as the every possession defense that they played.
For sure. And our two nightcaps were 1 versus 2 games. White River took on Aberdeen Christian. White River came in as the number 1 team, but it looked pretty quickly like this Aberdeen Christian team had what it took to take down the Tigers. They didn't shut down Joe Seiler, but they did a good job overall in that game, getting the W.
Yeah, Malik Weaker is, as good of a scorer as anybody in Class B. He's really built out his in-between game where he was hitting a couple fadeaway jumpers in the mid-range, and he was really, really impressive. Obviously, when you give up 42 points to a player on the opposing team, it's always impressive when with two players you could match and exceed that. So that's what Aberdeen Christian was able to do, and they got a really, really good roster, and they're thinking big things for this year.
They are, and after the game, we had a chance to catch up with their head coach Matt Rohrbach, who is a first-year head coach, but feels like he's been on part of the staff for a long time, watched these guys for a long time, and that's a little bit about what he talked about. He is our guest coach this week. Let's hear from Matt Rohrbach.
Obviously, it's a big win for you guys. I mean, kind of a statement. I mean, obviously, almost 20-point win. I mean, that's got to feel pretty good, coming into it.
Yeah. We definitely wanted revenge after last year. The boys definitely didn't like how they played in the other classic that we had over Christmas break, and so I just the response that they made trying to kind of revenge, and we had a great week of practice, and I mean, to have 6 leaders, 6 seniors on the team who really want it as much as our guys, it's pretty fun to coach.
Yeah, obviously, strong returning group, but this is your first year leading everything. So I mean, what was sort of that early days of practice, sort of getting acclimated to the team, like for you?
Yeah, I come in it from a lucky situation because my brother was the coach, and so there wasn't a kid I didn't know from the team, and that's huge. When you come into a team, you don't have to learn names, you don't have to learn who's good at this, who's good at this. It really makes the transition seamlessly. So, but again, I got to give all the credit to the guys. I mean, they're such a good group, and they work every day, and they really want this. So it's a big win for them, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Even before you were making the lineups and stuff like that, did you feel like you were studying this team in the past couple of years or something like that?
Yeah, I hadn't really missed a game probably in the last 7 or 8 years. So I've been watching every single Aberdeen Christian game since I graduated. So, just kind of I kind of knew maybe there was a chance that I would have a chance to coach this year. So I've been ready to go probably for the last year. And so I give credit to my brother for kind of helping me through that.
Yeah. How soon did you realize that, this is probably going to be a fun inaugural season for you?
Well, I mean, they made it to state for the last couple of years, and they haven't had the big one. They want the state championship, and so I kind of just, I knew that I had to come in ready to go because this is their last year, or a lot of them. It's a lot of their last years, and so if I'm not ready to go, then, it kind of wastes their talent. So they definitely have pushed me to make sure that I'm ready and lead us to a state championship.
It seems like Malik was really taking a step forward this year. Obviously, he was a really good shooter last year, but his in-between game, obviously creating, that's really come along. I mean, did you sort of talk to him at the beginning of the year at all, sort of ask him to take that extra step, or is that something that he just put upon himself?
He played a lot of AAU ball this summer, so I definitely give some of the credit to that. There's no harder worker than Malik Weaker. He's just, he's made himself into a great player, and, everybody knows him as a great shooter, but like you said tonight, he was, dropping dimes, and he was everywhere offensively and defensively, and he really was the catalyst tonight, and so I couldn't be more proud of him. But yeah, he understands that this is kind of his team, and speaking of it, it's kind of his team, and he wants to make sure that he's ready to go to lead his guys.
I was just going to say, obviously this game's about you, but it had to be fun competing against a competitor like Joe Seiler.
Yep.
What was that like, trying to contain that guy?
Yeah, we haven't seen somebody hit, NBA threes like that at the consistent level that he did. So credit to him. He was on fire tonight, but I really just loved how we adjusted in the second half. We didn't let it bother us, and we kind of frustrated him and didn't really allow him to get going in the third quarter and fourth quarter. So credit to the guys that were on him, Andrew Brennan, Connor Furman, Malik Weaker, Jackson Isaacson, as well as the help side. You could kind of see us flying around tonight. So it was a whole team effort. So just couldn't be more proud of the guys.
What does it say about your team that you could let a guy go for 40, but still obviously come away with a convincing win?
Yeah, we have a motto. We like to say that we don't really care who the best player is every single night. We care who the best team is. And I felt like tonight they probably had the best. Not probably, they had the best player tonight. But the score at the end of the game is in our favor, and so I felt like we did enough to win the game, and couldn't be more proud of the guys for honoring that motto.
Yeah, definitely a team to keep an eye on this year, Michael. This is a really good starting five with a deep bench.
Yeah, it's not just Weaker too. Jackson Isaacson had a really good game, and Ethan Russell is a guy who's a great athlete in football, and he's carrying that over to the basketball season. A really good basketball player as well. So they just got a bunch of great athletes out there, and I think they're going to do big things.
Yeah, nice game by the Knights. The nightcap featured 1 versus 2 in Class A. Sioux Valley took on Dakota Valley. Oliver Vincent came out on fire, and he's as noted by you, one of the most exciting players in the state to watch, and he came out, drained 3 3-pointers right off the top, but this Dakota Valley team proved to be too tough in the end.
I thought the best matchup in this game was the one between Randy Rosenquist and Oliver Vincent. Obviously, those are the two guys with the ball in their hands the most, but Randy Rosenquist just is so good. He played so well. He got to the rim with ease. He was able to make some no-look passes, get some steals. I think he had 4 steals in the game. He ended up, putting up a bunch of points, a bunch of assists. He's a really, really good player and somebody who should be talked about more when you talk about the success of Dakota Valley, who, they look like they're headed to another dominant season. I mean, it's still early, but everybody was saying that Sioux Valley is really right there as the number 2 team, and a loss like this shouldn't really necessarily knock them off that. But to do something like that in a neutral site against the Sioux Valley team, I mean, you got to start thinking about potentially a back-to-back for Dakota Valley.
Yeah, and they are in quite a winning streak right now, and they're one of the teams we're going to talk about. We're going to do an overview of all the teams that are still undefeated to this point, and we will get to some of those undefeated teams in boys basketball. But let's start with girls basketball. The only undefeated teams are in Class A. Double A has no undefeated teams. Class B has no undefeated teams. So let's talk about Class A with 4 undefeated teams. The number 1 team in the state right now is Hamlin. They got a nice 5-point win against St. Thomas More at the Pentagon earlier this year. They just took out Florence Henry. They won at the Dakota State Classic, where they took out West Lyon, a good team from Iowa. And this team is rolling right now. They deserve that number 1 ranking. Their biggest test coming up is Friday, where they play an undefeated Sisseton team. And that'll be a test for them. But Hamlin has pretty much passed everything with flying colors so far.
Yeah, I mean, that front court is as good as any in the state. They got some really, really talented players down there, and it's they've been to the finals the last couple of years, and they're just falling short there. But it's no surprise that they're coming out strong in this early season. They've got experience now that they maybe didn't have in previous years, and they're definitely making the most of it.
And then we've got Vermilion. They got a huge confidence boost, maybe one of the more surprising undefeated teams coming into the year, but maybe we shouldn't be surprised. A lot of talent on this team, a confidence booster against Wagner at the Hanson Classic. They've got some tough games coming up. Sioux Falls Christian on February 2, and then they've got the NEC DAC 12 Clash coming up, which will likely be a matchup with Hamlin on February 4th. This could be some interesting battles for Vermilion this year. What are your impressions of them? You just watched them a week ago.
Yeah, I mean, I was able to see them against Wagner, obviously, at the Hanson Classic, and they're really impressive. They're really young, and Wagner's a really good team. I believe Ashlyn Copel yesterday or a couple days ago was able to get a 30-point game, and she's a big time freshman that's going to be doing a lot for Wagner down the stretch, and to limit her the way that they did, I believe even Vermilion after the game was a little bit stunned by it. I mean, they didn't come in to expecting to win. They thought that maybe can give up a fight, and obviously you want to come out with a win in every single game, but Wagner has always just been sort of that top of the top. But they were able to get out of the win. I think they think differently about themselves, so they're a team that's definitely going to be playing a different level of basketball down the stretch.
2 more teams in Class A that are unbeaten that don't get as much to talk about. Red Cloud, they won the LNI earlier this year. They've got their leading scorer is a freshman, Ashlyn Carlo Blunt, but they're a very formidable senior group. They have St. Thomas More coming up in February 6th, and then Rapid City Christian on February 10th. So 2 really tough battles for them coming up here in the next couple of weeks. And then how about Sisseton? Haven't gotten that signature win, but they are 6-0 against teams 500 or better. They have Hamlin Friday, so I don't expect them to stay on this unbeaten list for very long, but congratulations to what they've done so far. If they somehow get by Hamlin, they're going to have a tough matchup coming up in the DAC 12 NEC Clash on February 4th, likely against Sioux Falls Christian, maybe T area, and then they've got Florence Henry to close out the season. So it'll be a tough end of the season for Sisseton, but we definitely want to mention them as one of the unbeaten teams in girls basketball. All those teams, like we said, in Class A. Now, in boys basketball, we had a chance to look at one of those undefeated teams in Double A, and it's rare that we see an undefeated team in Double A. Just last season, Roosevelt pulled that feat off by going unbeaten all season long. How does this Jefferson team compare to the Roosevelt team you saw last year? And what are your impressions of this Cavalier team after watching them last night against Brandon Valley?
I feel like the talent is, pretty much on par, where, Jefferson just has enough at the end of games to, close out these close ones. And, Jefferson, their biggest step that they need to take is they need to start faster. And that's something that we saw in their first game against Roosevelt. We saw yesterday against Brandon Valley. Brandon Valley was up, I believe, 17 at one point. And that was in the first half. But, they've been blowing teams out in the second half just because, their talent's so good. Between Caden Year, Taylor Ashley, Bo Giblin, they got so many people who could have the ball in their hands and make a play. And then, obviously their front court's playing really well too. They got some really athletic guys there. So it's they're a team that I think even though they've gone through this season undefeated so far, they've played through some adversity. So they know how to win these tight games. They know how to win these games where it seems like maybe some people would be counting them out when Brandon Valley looked really, really good in the first half. So it's I think Jefferson not only is undefeated, but they're a little bit battle tested too. And to be undefeated in a really competitive Class AA this year, I mean, you kind of have to be.
Yeah, it's interesting because their closest at the end of the game were 9-point wins coming into that 1-point victory against Brandon Valley. But I agree with you; they have been battle tested. There's been several games where at halftime you were like, when is the real Jefferson team showing up? But defense usually is what really propels their offense, and they have got so many athletes. They are a lot of fun to watch, but they do remain unbeaten. Their biggest test coming up, Mitchell on January 31st. They've got Sioux Falls Christian in a makeup game on February 3rd, and then a game I know Lincoln has definitely circled on their schedule. They want another shot at Jefferson. They play on February 17th. That will be a lot of fun. And let's move into Class A now, where a bulk of these teams are, once again, undefeated teams are in Class A. Sioux Falls Christian, Dakota Valley, Rapid City Christian, and Hot Springs are our 4 undefeated teams. Sioux Falls Christian had just a 2-point victory against Del Rapids earlier in the season, and then last night against T Area on Tuesday night, they really had a battle going into the fourth quarter, ended up pulling away at the end. But this is a team that's got some young players. They've tested themselves. They've beaten O'Gorman in a class above them. But coming up, they've got Dakota Valley tonight, Thursday night, and that's going to be a real test for them to see if they can keep this undefeated season going.
That's going to be a really, really good game. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, and speaking of Dakota Valley, they are the other undefeated team in Class A here, East River, and they just got done taking out Sioux Valley at number 2. They haven't lost in 2 seasons, so this is a team that really will have their hands full against Sioux Falls Christian on Thursday night. You just watched Dakota Valley. We talked about the talent up and down the roster. I don't think they're talking to Jason Kleiss last week. They're not so worried about the win streak, but I'll tell you what, if they get a huge win tonight, I think there's a question of whether anybody will be able to beat this team this year.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably be their biggest test remaining. There's obviously some teams that could emerge in the second half, but in terms of what we know sort of at this stage of the season, Sioux Falls Christian and Sioux Valley, those are the people that are going to be competing with them. So, that's to get those in a span of 2 games, that'd be a big deal.
Let's talk about 2 more teams in Class A. West River that are undefeated. Rapid City Christian, they really got on the map with an LNI win, taking that tournament, in consecutive days, not losing, taking out Joe Seiler and White River. That really put them on the map. But they've got St. Thomas More coming up on Friday, and then Hot Springs later in February. Those will be 2 really tough games for a team that's really proven they belong in the top 5, and they've kind of worked their way up into the rankings, but now seem like a fixture there. So that's going to be a real fun team to watch. And then Hot Springs, this is definitely the most under the radar team of any undefeated team so far. really the only team they've beaten that's had a really good record is Faith, and that's of course a team that's a class below them. It's going to be tough for them until they get a signature win, and they've got a chance to do that against St. Thomas More on February 14th. They also have Red Cloud coming up on the 16th, and they end the season against Rapid City Christian. So it'd be really tough for them to keep it going. But they haven't lost, so props to Hot Springs. And that closes out our unbeaten teams in Class A. But we will also want to talk about the one team left in Class B that's unbeaten, Aberdeen Christian. And not only did they beat White River on Saturday, they also took out another undefeated team, Wabash Summit, just before that. So Aberdeen Christian playing with some real confidence right now. And they look like the deepest, most consistent team to me in Class B.
Yeah, and they look like a team that, really, really craves to make that next step in the state tournament. They've come really, really close the past couple of years, and they're looking for something more. They want a state championship this year, so they're playing like it, and new head coach or not, that group's gelling really well.
So a lot of great games coming up over the next week or so. We don't have any live games coming up, but I'm sure you need to stay tuned to my coverage and Michael's coverage of high school hoops over the next couple of weeks to stay in touch as we get close to postseason in just a couple of weeks away, Michael.
Yeah, regions start pretty soon. So, we're hitting the month of February, and that's when the fun starts. So
it goes quickly. Well, we'll be back next week for another episode of Talkin Hoops. Appreciate you tuning in, and we'll see you next week.